Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dave Reuter, be your host. I've got my coworker Brooke Fresher in the background. She'll be manning the chat box and the polls as we go along. So just a reminder, this is a roundtable. Feel free to chime in on anything that we're talking about. If I misstate something, feel free to correct me. A lot of this is my research, my looks at things. So feel free to chime in. This is about really connecting with everybody and having a say and looking at all the different sides of these things. So feel free to either get in the chat box or unmute and ask a question during any part of this. Don't be shy. Let's see, what else do I need to talk about? Our partners a little bit. I do want to recognize our partners that they're able to allow us to bring you this information and help throughout the year with our communities for compliance. So again, I appreciate all of our partners and feel free to contact us anytime you have any questions about anything related to stormwater or the environment. We're here really to help everybody in our communities. Do want to talk about some upcoming events if you're not aware of them. Looks like we've got OSWA. I wouldn't be doing my board member duties if I didn't mention the Ohio Stormwater Association. We've got an educational webinar series coming up, regulatory updates, emerging stormwater issues. It's with Lou McMahon from McMahon Douglas, one of the premier state environmental law firms around. He's very knowledgeable, and this is your chance to hear some of the updates that are coming, get the legal side of things, which, that's something. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what a lot of this stuff means and what it entails, but anytime we see these, large scale regulatory updates, there's always that kind of that trickle down to the boots on the ground eventually. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today with the TMDLs and what's going on there and how that may affect us down the road. So that's coming up October 5th. You can register online through OSWA's website. Right now, OEPA is virtual compliance assistance. It's occurring today, I think, actually, and week 2 begins next week. Check that out if you have compliance assistance needs. It's a great webinar for that. It's free. All you need to do is get on there, OEPA's website, and register for that. We got an auspicious month. This is the month of Stormwater Awareness Week, October 16th through 22. This is your chance for communities, for residents to get involved with stormwater awareness. There's outreach available. If you go to our website or to the Ohio Stormwater Week website, just Google Ohio Stormwater Week. That'll take you to the Ohio website. There's a toolkit in there. It's media toolkits, press releases, resolutions, activity calendars, that kind of thing. But it's your chance as communities to take some ownership in some of this outreach. And again, like I say, this is really what's prompting this webinar, is that outreach capabilities that we have and meeting some of our permit requirements based on the TMDL outreach. That's kind of a program area that we're targeting to get the word out about TMDLs and talk about that and get that language out there so we all understand what's coming down the pike potentially with changes to the permits. So Stormwater Week this year, October 16th to 22, check it out. And then at the end of the month, we have OTEC. It's ODOT's technical conference. Really some good speakers there. Always something of interest to find at OTEC. So again, check that out when you can. Okay, so today's agenda, I just want to say we're going to talk a little bit about TMDLs. We're going to talk a lot about TMDLs, just different aspects of it. So, what is the TMDLs? We'll talk a little bit about that. Recently, the MOMI TMDL preliminary modeling report has come out. We'll talk a bit about that. And then we'll look at some of the existing TMDL standards that are in the construction general permit, MS4 permit, in fact, all of the general permits, and how that might affect us down the road. So that's kind of the agenda today. I don't expect we've got 2 hours scheduled. I can probably talk for an hour, and then hopefully we can have some question and answer time, but I don't expect we'll take the entire 2 hours. With that said, we do have some poll questions throughout this presentation. I do ask that you participate in those if you want to have contact hours for this webinar. We'll be basing your engagement throughout the webinar with those polls. So we need to have you participate in those polls so that we can give you the contact hours associated with that. If you're in a group, be sure you do a sign-in sheet, and we can get you those contact hours based on that sign-in sheet as well. Brooke, I think you said something about if we have phone. I don't know if I saw any phone numbers or not.
Right. Sometimes we get folks that are just on a phone and can't really participate in the poll. So in that case, I will just keep an eye out and make note of those. Let us
know either through the chat or something like that. Well, I guess you can't chat too if you're on the phone, maybe. So it'll be a tough one there. So just remember that if you want the contact hours, and be sure you take those polls. Let's get started. TMDL, total maximum daily loads. That's pretty much, I think of this as diets. This is the diet plan for our creeks and streams so that they're meeting those water quality designations that we've placed on it. I want to say this is a scientifically based, data-driven approach at looking at what streams can assimilate over the year's time. So we're looking at those natural environmental services that these waters can provide without degradation. So that's where you get the water quality designations that come in. You get these loads that have been looked at, and what kind of loading can be assimilated in these waterways, and that's really what we're looking at. If you look at this, the middle picture there, total suspended solids. How much can you really put into this stream before you're degrading that? I'd say, on a daily load analysis, what you're looking at, you're probably degrading that stream with that kind of loading. Nutrients, another big problem. Depending on where it's from, we got agricultural nutrients. You can have fertilizers, a lot of different sources for nutrients. Even the amount of stormwater being generated and eroding banks, causing that legacy phosphorus to be removed in the sediments. There's a lot of different aspects there. Even the picture of the rack there, if you're in Los Angeles, they have a TMDL for trash. So, judging by that trash rack there, I'd say, that's probably not a bad idea as well. How much can you really put into a stream before you start degrading it? So that's TMDLs in the short. Like I say, remember it is kind of a diet, and specifically, it's scientifically and data-driven look at these streamways. I couldn't not mention, it's really about transport. If we didn't have transport of these nutrients off sites into those streams, we really wouldn't have a problem with TMDLs. But the transport mechanism is that rainfall. And if we look at this is data driven from it's decade data from 1900 to 2000. I couldn't find a more recent one for the last couple of decades, but this is from 1900 into the 2000s. If you look at all of those, there's a lot of green bars there, which means that precipitation change has increased fairly significantly in a steady way over the last 50, 60, 40 years. Most areas have seen an increase in rainfall, and that causes problems. That's a lot of precipitation. That's a lot of changes that drives that stormwater, and that drives that loading that we're seeing in a lot of these areas. Also causes other problems. We've had a lot of breaches. This is something that we need to look at, in that sustainability aspect of where we place things and how we treat streams. Having setbacks and buffers from these streams is an important consideration. We have had numerous local breaches of streams into facilities. This is just one example where that stormwater basin has captured the streamway during a high flood event and caused that erosion to occur. So now we're getting to our first poll question. We'll have Brooke will push that out. So what does TMDL stand for? Here's your choices. Make your selections. And we'll see how you do.
Unmute myself.
Looks like we got 100% answered. 19 out of 19, is that correct?
Close. We got one more, although it could be
20 out of 20.
Okay. Let's go ahead and end and share results. Oh,
so we got it. So Brooke and I had a little bet on what we'd get for the over-unders on this one. So the answer is total maximum daily loads. We got 2 for total minimum daily loads. I wanted to see if that would throw anybody. Everybody was a little quick on the gun there. Went for the minimum. It's not the minimum, it's the maximum daily loads.
Perfect.
And nobody took too much dumping lately, huh? Okay. Thanks for that. And again, like I say, thanks for participating. Be sure you do participate so we can track that that throughout the presentation. Moving on, let's see. How come I'm not switching here?
There we go.
Yeah. So TMDLs are really nothing new. We've been looking at them for quite a number of years. This is a spreadsheet, just a screenshot of the spreadsheet that we have, just so we can look at communities, localities in our area, where the approved TMDL is already established. This has helped us direct what used to be the old water quality or watershed action plans for communities to help us with targeting what that TMDL load was, targeting projects and funding. That's really how we used this in the long run. So there are approved TMDLs in many communities right now that you can take a look at, and we can certainly we'll have this available if you want to check out where you're at, what your community might have for our TMDL loads. So one thing about this, so these older approved TMDLs, there's a lot of ones that are not approved that are in draft form. They look at near field causes of impairment. So you have things like wastewater treatment plant outlets. You might have package plants at small communities. May have If you notice in there, in that list, you see things like habitat alteration. Those are kind of near field effects that we were looking at. What could be done, where there's habitat alteration, perhaps you look in and do something like a stream restoration in that locale to improve that habitat. So that's really what this is looking at. Maybe, especially in urban areas, HSTS, home septic treatment system outlets that are causing pathogen loading, those kind of things, which was what most of these TMDLs really look at, as those near field causes of impairment. So let's talk a little bit about the MOME TMDL that's been proposed. It's out in draft right now. This is the preliminary going mental there. Preliminary management or monitoring report. I forgot already. There's a lot of information, but my point being is take a look at the area that's involved with this. A lot of drainage, a lot of area. It's a big area, and it's a big area that's mostly confined to agriculture. That is really the big land use of this drainage area. And what's that? What drains off of there is going down to Lake Erie on that western Lake Erie basin, and causing impairments like the harmful algal blooms that we've been seeing in the past couple of years. So through international agreement, they have looked at Lake Erie and the inputs to Lake Erie, and are coming up with, again, that diet for Lake Erie. What's going to be possible without affecting that water quality aspect? So now we're looking really at far field effects. This is a large drainage area. This has a lot of non-point input to it that is causing impairments. And how are we going to go about reaching those water quality standards that we've set for Lake Erie and, frankly, the drainage areas that are contributing to that? Here's the web address if you want to check out Ohio EPA's website for the MOME nutrient TMDL. Lots and lots of information there to look at. I've looked at some of it. I haven't looked at probably enough of it to understand it completely. But what it's really going at is they're going to be assigning some loading quantities to certain practices, either in the watershed or by sub-watersheds. So that's something that's definitely coming down the pike with the MOME TMDL, and frankly with the rest of the TMDLs and the other general permits. If you think about what Ohio EPA has control over, basically it's what they're permitting, and they don't have permitting over the agriculture aspect of discharges. That's Ohio Department of Agriculture does that. So what you're seeing up there is this TMDL not affecting agriculture that much, but does affect the general permit holders that are up there. So really, and again, I applaud EPA. They're stuck in a kind of hard spot because they're responsible for that water quality aspect of our state waters, yet they don't have control over this agricultural component in this watershed. So all they can really do is look at what can they assign to permittees for control of that watershed. A lot of that loading is the big lift from that watershed is going to be in agriculture. That's really where that lies. But it also sets a precedent for how to look at the other general permits that are down the road that they do have control over. So they're kind of walking a tightrope there. It's like, how can we assign these loads to general permittees that are equitable, basically based on loading. Up there, I would say it's probably not equitable to just say, hey, well, 50%'s ag and 50%'s general permit holders. That's probably not the case. But when you move into more urban areas like we're in here in Franklin County, that may be something that we need to look at and have some input on. You notice in this fact sheet, they're asking for stakeholder input. This is a little old. This came out in June. I think the comment period is over, but I do think you can always, give them some input. This really is a collaborative effort, and I've had good conversations with EPA on a lot of these things, and some of those we'll point out here today, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and it does look like the comment period is open until October 28th still for this one.
Okay. Thanks, Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
So take a look at this information if you like. I think it's important to have and provide some feedback on what to do. This again, this is the Maumee watershed. You may not have specific comments for this because it's like, hey, how does this affect me? But it does have some effect on general permit holders, and we've seen that. The TMDL updates for the MS4 permit. There's a lot of new standards listed in there. The construction general permit, there's new TMDL standards in that as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. I did want to mention the one of the aspects that's coming up is the Euclid wastewater treatment plant limits. And again, I commend Ohio EPA for taking on the federal EPA on those limits for this wastewater treatment plant. It's a treatment plant in Euclid, draining in the Cuyahoga area and Cleveland area. It's been in a consent order to get repaired, basically, which are just completing, I believe, or have completed. And their proposed nutrient limit that Ohio said they were going to have, federal EPA disagreed with that and put a order of magnitude or two lower limit on what they could allow. And Ohio EPA is actually taking this to court because, really, the feds are not, Ohio has a very, like I said, scientific, data-driven process to look at these, and the federal limit is kind of arbitrary and capricious, as my lawyer friends would like to say. So again, like I say, I think they're doing a good job in looking at that and making sure that what's good for Ohio is really how we need to approach these things. The phrase I keep hearing is, what are they saying? I'm getting old and forgetful.
Sorry, I can't help you with that one.
Yeah, the management, I'm trying to think. Gosh, it'll come to me later. I'll talk about it later. So again, like I was saying, what's the agency seeking? Feedback, look for information not considered in a source assessment, additional information on management practices that will improve management of dissolved reactive phosphorus, additional information or feedback on opportunities to achieve reductions, and feedback on proposals to use total phosphorus watershed general permit to implement waste load. So those 4 bullets there, sum up what they're, this is really a cooperative effort. If we have ideas, or things that we don't notice in what they're reporting, it's time to speak up and let them know about these things. That's good for Ohio. I think we can all agree that we're all looking for, water quality, good water quality. I want my kids to be able to go down and fish and swim in the local creek without worrying about anything. I think that's a common goal that we can all get behind, and have that desire for those kind of goals. So take a look at their website. That preliminary modeling results has just come out. Adaptive management, that was what I was looking for. That's the phrase I hear is, the EPA is looking at adaptive management for this, which, really, if you look at it, means we're going to do what we're doing currently, stay the course and see how things go, but we're going to change things as we see fit. So that's where our input can be important. What can we do to help with, directing that or giving some input so that we're getting what needs to happen in our areas. So think about that, take a look at that. And if you look in there, this is the Appendix 3 from the MAMI report. It shows waste load allocations for regular effluent discharges of the MPDS permits that are group load category for consideration of the general permit. My point is that this is being considered as a general permit. So, under that general permit consideration, there will be standards, whether that's, sub-watershed based or watershed based. Those are the things that are going to come into the general permit. So that shouldn't be a surprise to you, because there are already some of those in the permits right now as it is. If you look at, this is another screenshot I took out of the MS4 permit, and it basically lists what they're looking at in the MAMI for loads, spring seasonal total phosphorus, daily total phosphorus. So at least, but again, the thing to point out here is there's mostly wastewater treatment plants listed here. These are the things that Ohio EPA has control over. And in order to do that, this may end up, it will be applying to most of the general permits that are out there. If you're not familiar with the general permits that are out there, this is currently the list of general permits that are available. You may not have TMDLs listed for bridge maintenance wastewater. I don't know how much a TMDL change you're going to make there, but you see, construction site stormwater is in there, which we work with all the time, and the small MS4 stormwater we work with all the time. Small sanitary discharges, that's something that we work with. So all of these general permits could theoretically be subject to TMDL standards at some point. And like I say, they already exist in some of these permits. MS4 permit. So what they've done in the MS4 permit is something I wanted to note here is they've listed TMDL pollutants specifically for those areas. If you remember back to that TMDL list that we had, there was things like habitat alteration, siltation, things of that nature that don't show up in this because you really don't have a TMDL for habitat alteration. What's the unit there basically? So here they've listed what kind of thing is important to them. And this is kind of, if you look at this, this is preliminary things that they needed to get into the permits so that we can make progress in the future towards BMPs or what have you that are going to reduce some of these. So you start seeing these listed. Again, this is just screenshot of page 33 there, Franklin County, and what that list starts to entail. You can see most of them. You got E. coli, total phosphorus, and total suspended solids. And that's pretty much true for most of Franklin County. At least we have all three of those, at least somewhere in most of our communities, just depends on which one they have. But part of our outreach efforts have been to broadly look at these. Any of our outreach that goes out to communities talks about the TMDLs, pollutants a little bit, and tries to tie in that language, just so we're getting that information out there. Everybody kind of understands when we talk about TMDLs what it is, what it means, you know, and how we're going to treat those. So again, take a look at the MS4 permit if you want to look at your area and see what those are listed for your area. And it looks like we're at poll question 2. Do you know the TMDL in your area? I think this will be an interesting result.
Yep, we're about 80% in. Give a couple more seconds here. This is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to end and share. So right down the middle,
Yeah.
yes and no, and some that know they don't have one, or hopefully they don't have one.
I think that's a good mix. That's kind of what I expected a little bit. That's, you know, kind of what I thought. I don't think people understand that, and that's really why we're doing outreach like this. This webinar is part of that TMDL outreach standard that is in the MS4 permit. We're trying to reach out and get that information out about TMDLs to our communities. So thank you for participating, and that's, like I say, one checkbox for us on our MS4 management for the year. Like I was saying, we already have some of these standards already in the permits. This is an example. I kind of go into the weeds on this one a little bit. If you work in the Big Darby watershed under the construction general permit, you have to look at this Appendix A. It used to be a Darby specific permit, which is kind of what I think we'll be seeing in the MAMI, is that either appendix or specific general permit for the area. But we already have some of that existing currently. And I have the pleasure of working in the Darby, so I get to look at this constantly. We probably have more construction going in the Big Darby watershed than most communities, just because it's, you know, on the boundaries of our city, and we have a lot of projects expanding out into that area. So this is something that came up to me looking at the standards involved with sediment settling ponds and sampling, which is new to the construction general permit. Basically, you see that this has the sediment settling ponds, has the 134 cubic yards sediment per acre, that's been in there, but then maintain a target discharge performance standard of 45 milligrams per liter of total suspended solids. And it goes on about how to sample and when to sample, and then it ends with the permittee shall sample in accordance with sampling procedures outlined in 40 CFR 136. So the 40 CFR 136 is the federal monitoring standard that they're referencing there. And again, sampling shall occur as follows. I won't go into that, but basically we have this performance standard for sites developing in the Big Darby that must meet this 45 milligrams per liter of total suspended solids. So how do we do that? Well, the Ohio method is based on this report here for using these rapid assessment of TSS with turbidity tubes, these transparency tubes that you see here. You fill them up with water, You pour it out until you can see basically there's a Secchi disc or a dot on the bottom of these tubes. You look down through the tube, and then when you can see the dot, you read what the level is, and then that gets converted into the milligrams per liter. So you're looking at inches in the tube and then converting that to milligrams per liter. This was put out by Ohio EPA. I believe Lake County SWCD was responsible for the development of these as well. And it really was looking at that ability to rapidly assess that. Otherwise, for TSS, you know, this is really a lab process that you have to do with the Imhoff cones, let it settle for a specific amount of time before you look at that TSS loading. So they were really looking for a quick way to assess TSS in streams. So I've been looking at these with the Darby in mind and construction out there, and how we could look at it from a compliance monitoring standpoint, whether or not they were going to be able to meet this 45 milligrams per liter. So I've been testing those devices against a portable turbidity meter to get an idea of what 45 milligrams per liter looks like based on NTU units, which nephelometric turbidity units is what the federal standard is. So comparing those two, you know, I have no idea what 45 milligrams per liter looks like in NTUs. And there is no valid conversion between the two from what I've found. No scientifically valid comparison. So you can't really convert from milligrams per liter to NTUs. So some of the comparison that I've done so far, I don't have enough data points yet, but looking at sites in the Darby and their sediment basins, what's in the basins frequently is over the 45 milligrams per liter. The discharge can be variable, but somewhat accurate with the sediment tubes and the turbidity meter. Those line up fairly evenly. This again is right out of that report, though. We caution against using transparency tube data to estimate TSS when the purpose of the sampling is for potential litigation. When I see that, and from a compliance monitoring standpoint, you know, I have a problem with that being. I'm there for compliance monitoring. That's what I'll be looking at, and I'll be using the turbidity meter for my analysis of that. So when I think about that, the other aspect of that is, so turbidity benchmark, this is from the federal construction general permit, which we don't really recognize unless it's federal installation or Indian territories. A lot of this is used out west, more or less, but there is a federal construction general permit. That turbidity threshold is 50 NTUs. So my comparison was really, you know, how can we relate 45 milligrams per liter to the 50 NTUs? And from what I've seen, it does match fairly well when we're looking at, you know, our clay soils and that kind of sediment load. It doesn't match very well if I look at something. I've taken a few first flushes from urban areas, and we have a very different reading in turbidity units compared to the milligrams per liter. So that's something that I've talked with Justin Reinhardt a little bit about. We've had some conversations about this. How can we make changes that are going to allow, you know, that comfort for compliance monitoring? Where are we going to go? You know, this is already in place. I know there's already construction in the Darby. This is really on the NOI holder at this point. to do this sampling and have that sampling available for the compliance monitoring. When you take a look at those sites, they should have that information on site on what their sediment basins are discharging. And if they're exceeding that discharge, they should have plans on how they're going to address that and make changes to their site so that they can meet that. The other conversation we've had is the 45 milligrams. Both Justin and I, we aren't even sure where that came from. I don't know what that standard was meant for or how that was established, but that's something that needs to be answered. So I do think we need to look at the federal permit on this one and kind of judge where we're going with that as far as turbidity standard in the Darby. So that's just a very quick example of what could come happen, what kind of problems that you have out in the field, or, boots on the ground kind of problem. I'm still not sure where we're going to go with this. Like I say, we have a couple of large projects coming up in the Darby. We will be looking at this over time. We'll see how operators handle their monitoring of this, and we'll know something a little further. The construction general permit will be coming up in 23. We should see some outreach materials, I think, probably shortly on that for some stakeholder input. So keep that in mind. And like I say, this is a collaborative effort amongst us all. I think it's well worth your time to make those comments, make those contacts, and point out some of these things that may be problematic. So what can we do? That's the other thing, like, okay, now if we got this coming down the pipe, what kind of things can we look at? What kind of things can we do to address this? Something I'm looking at, urban BMPs that reduce or remove phosphorus. This is the kind of thing that you're seeing, in the MOMI with nutrient reduction plans, saturated buffers, things of that nature that apply to agricultural properties. How do we address that in urban areas? When it comes to loading in urban areas, we may have a bigger piece of the pie, so to speak, as far as loading to take care of, and that's really difficult to do in urban areas. So what kind of urban BMPs can we look at that are going to reduce phosphorus? There's something to look at. Minnesota is doing a lot with some iron additions to their sand filters for phosphorus removal and phosphorus and nitrogen removal. There's those kind of approaches that we need to look at. Something I'm keen on is old stormwater basins. As they age, they start to export nutrients. Is there a mechanism there where we can reset that nutrient clock on these basins? And dredging is always an option. There are there's products like Foslock that is a lanthanum-based clay that will bind phosphorus into basically rock-like material that is going to not be removed. So there's different things like that that we can probably do to reduce that or remove the phosphorus. Adding nutrient capacity to existing stormwater infrastructure. Here again, is another thing where we might be looking at, filtration aspects. Most of those, you see a lot of that in Chesapeake Bay. It's a very expensive kind of long-term maintenance way to go about, but that's what they're doing there for their nutrient abilities there. It's something we might have to consider. Another aspect that I'm looking at that I find very interesting is like the two-stage ditches. I'm going to be actively involved with our drainage engineer to look at, any time they've got petition ditch projects to do, where can we put in a two-stage channel or something of that nature, or perhaps daylight a section of tile and create that two-stage ditch channel. And then the other aspect of that is the fundability of these projects. That's always the problem, is like, how do we fund projects, particularly if it were an HOA with a stagnant pond that needs to be dredged and they don't have the money to do that. Is there a way of funding that project that we might be able to help with that situation and get that reduction of nutrients? Those are the kind of things that I think we can take a look at further, and kind of things that we can address with Ohio EPA, and talk to them about these types of projects and what might be possible. I think that's definitely something that we're looking at down the road. If you're curious, ODA has got a two-stage ditch webinar. Here's the YouTube address that you're more than happy to take a look at and understand a little bit more about two-stage ditches, what that is and how they work. These have already been approved for funding with H2 Ohio funds just recently by the governor. I think the priority areas really are for the Maumee Basin right at the moment, but with the Gulf Coast hypoxia issues, those funds can be available locally as well. I do think perhaps the priority is more in Maumee at this point. Just the website for the water quality programs with Ohio EPA. If you want to take a look at there, lots of good information, lots of things to dig through and take a look at. So I just threw that in there for your use. Should you want to brush up a little bit more on this and see what's going on out there. Got one last poll question for you.
Okay. Give it another second or two. All right, and looks like majority found today
Got
helpful.
Got one smarty pants in the audience. That's good. Well, I'm glad this was helpful for everybody, for the most part.
I'd say you ready for if there's any. I haven't really gotten any questions through the chat box, but obviously if people have.
Yeah, I see 10 in there. I'll go ahead and let's open it up for any questions. We've certainly got a little bit of time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I didn't think we would go our full time.
But feel free to unmute yourself as well if you have specific questions or something that you want to discuss.
Yep. Like I said, this is your roundtable. So if there's things I said, things you'd like to discuss, things you want to check out.
Right. Especially the folks that at the beginning didn't know if they had a TMDL or didn't know what their TMDL was. If you have a certain community, we can definitely pull up that Appendix A and kind of look through that list too to see if there's any that are listed in there. Confirm.
So I will say that, a lot of what we're talking about is long-term. You've got to think about this down the road. I'm certainly, this permit term, of course, nothing's going to change in the MS4 permit, maybe some minor changes in the construction general permit. in 23. But this is really long-term, decade type changes, and just, it's kind of nice to know where the bus is going a little bit down the road in the future, and how best we can plan for things like that.
Well, like we've talked a little bit too. I mean, looking at once the new the TMDLs that are in draft still, once those come on, they might add some more components to that. And then where we've looked at salt trying to get into the permit in the past in some regard, and so obviously that's a TMDL that will probably come into play somewhere down the road. So just trying to think of those potential pollutants that are we haven't really gotten a hold of yet. That are,
yeah, and even the requirements, like in the good housekeeping for MCM6, facilities that are in areas that have TMDLs, they're looking at doing a little better monitoring of your site if it drains to a TMDL or to an impaired water. So there's those kind of aspects, to your daily operation that may change. Well, I'm not hearing much. Sounds like crickets out there. That's the other sound. We need the music at the beginning, and then we need the crickets.
For sure.
Yeah. We'll try to make those improvements for next time.
Yeah. And we have been recording this, so again, we will be sending out a follow-up email with certificates and some resources. I've been putting links into the chat, obviously, as Dave's been talking, to kind of help get you to where some of those links that he was mentioning. But look for that, and probably within a couple weeks, I'll have that out to everybody. And again, reach out if you have any questions after the fact too.
So with that, I guess I'm not hearing anything but the crickets. I guess that just, with almost 99%, I did a good job. So yep. Everybody got what they needed out of this. And I thank you for your participation again. We'll see you next year with another series of roundtables. I hope you can join us then. And I will call this an adjourn for this session.
Yep.
Thanks once again.